How do you keep an eye on all the nonverbal elements whilst doing active listening?
Yeah, so there's a lot going on for everyone on video. You might be sharing your screen and you may not even be able to see very many people, right? Virtually. There are a few tips and tricks of the trade. A lot of them come down to the way that you actually set up who the active audience members on your video call and where they show up on the screen, right? If you have multiple screens, you can often split things up in such a way that the people you're talking to take up most of that like visual real estate, so that when you are speaking into the lens or you are looking at someone else who's on the call, it's not a huge lift to look somewhere else, right? We want to encourage ourselves also to have more of that feeling of connection with our audience, right? So having your participants, which I see a lot, somewhere else makes it very difficult to engage with maybe content they're sharing and their own behaviors, or reference their behaviors while you're talking into the lens, because it's such a big distance for your own eyesight and your periphery, right? The other thing I'll share is if you are in a smaller group setting, and let's say you're the one who's speaking and you're looking into the lens, it's easier to take in the nonverbals of other people if you make the real estate of their visuals a little larger, right? So for example, I'm looking into the lens now, but I can see Abbie nodding her head every now and then, so I know she's still with me, right? And with active listening specifically, I actually recommend really not looking into the lens directly, right? Like if the people who are speaking or the person who is speaking is as close to your lens as possible, if you're looking here, right, that this is fine if you're the one who's listening. Looking into the lens is really a skill you want to leverage when you're the active speaker. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, Abbie, but I find that tends to be makes for the best experience for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we put too much pressure on being able to do it perfectly straight away. Nonverbal communication in person, both observing nonverbal communication effectively and showing nonverbal communication effectively, are different skills, and they are skills that take a lot of time to learn and perfect. When we now go onto our virtual interactions, those skills still apply, but it's slightly different because it's a slightly different skill set. It's a slightly different environment. You've got to get used to learning in this environment. With, as you said, particularly if you have multiple people, it's a new interaction mode that you're going to have to get used to. So just as you would with in-person nonverbals, it's going to take time and practice. And if you're trying to show active listening at the same time as observing their behaviors, it's going to be very cognitively costly because you're doing so many things at once. The more you practice it, the more it's going to become natural and normal, but it will feel unnatural to begin with. So, as I always say, practice with yourself first. Record yourself interacting with a friend or a family member, showing active listening whilst observing their behaviors. So when it comes to actually having those meetings, negotiations, or those virtual interactions of importance, you feel more comfortable with your ability to do both more naturally.
Yes, absolutely. And that piece of giving yourself the time and the space to rewire these habits or update them if you're looking to be more effective as a communicator in one area, like you do have to do that. You have to give yourself the time and the space. If you have some kind of support system around you in terms of receiving feedback, like for example, Virtual Sapiens and the in-call sidekick, that can be very helpful because you get this feedback loop that is otherwise pretty difficult to find, right? But as Abbie said, you can always record yourself and review it and see what comes up for you. Pass it along to someone else you trust and get feedback from them too. So video gives us a pretty powerful opportunity to get that feedback because we can record things, right? So easily. So something to consider in that regard as well.